You can talk. You don't have to not talk.
Well, we're being
Melissa.
recorded. We have to watch what we say.
Did the game end in a tie?
What? Yeah, it went into double overtime, and then it ended tied. We had a couple shots right towards the end, but
Okay,
so yeah, I was running literally from the field to get there.
yeah.
We are also sharing. How do I bring my window to the front? Sharing is paused. There we go. So we're streaming live on Facebook as well. Maybe people will see us on there. Just letting you know. It's on our page, on our private page, or it's not private, but you know what I mean. The Addison Northwest page.
I was looking for an email for it, but I didn't see an email like reminder at all. So I wasn't sure how many people would end up showing up for it.
Yeah, I don't know. It was in the Friday newsletters, so it should be. And it's on Facebook as an event. Mhm. And it's on Facebook as an event. There we are, we're live. Great. Well, let's see, how are we doing? It looks like we have quite a few people on. Got about a minute more. All right, let's see. Well, I think I'll go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone. I'm totally confused. Andy Capes, you are also here. Hello, your name is spelled funny. And Melissa's name was spelled just like that a few minutes ago, and we couldn't figure out why she was Melissa. But welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have you all here. This is our community engagement event titled Success in the Middle. I'm Sheila Soul, Superintendent of the Addison Northwest School District, and we have a number of wonderful panelists with us this evening. And I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves in just a moment. But I also want to add that one of the reasons why these folks are here together with us on the call is because in one way or another, they have historically been connected with middle school. So as part of their introduction, I'm going to ask everyone to share not only their name and where they work and what their connection is to perhaps our schools as appropriate, but also a memory or experience from either attending middle school or working in middle school that you think sort of speaks to the middle level learner, like something that resonates for you around middle level learning in your experience. So something personal. So is there anyone that wants to go first, and we'll just go right around? Monica, thank you.
Of course, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Monica McInerney, and I'm an associate professor of education at Castleton University. I've been there now for about 11 years. But before that, I taught at the brilliant Virgins Union High School, 7th and 8th grade English, with the lovely Melissa Muzzy, who's here tonight. And I taught there for 12 years, brilliant times. And I learned so much about community, about the needs of the young adolescent. And I've been so lucky to continue to be able to learn and grow and follow what our middle grades teachers are doing all around the state. But a favorite memory, I guess, would be certainly something I did with Melissa. We went on many many memories, many field trips, where we were out with the kids doing authentic work. We went apple picking, and then the students were able to contribute the apples, to local farms or local places. And we created just some incredible projects that were then brought into the community and benefited the community. So those are my favorite moments, and I'm so glad to be here.
Welcome. Thank you. Mary, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. And did you ask about an experience when we were in middle school, or
Either when you were in middle school or when you were teaching in middle school that stands out for you as a middle level memory?
So I'm Mary Sullivan, and I grew up in Virgins, moved away, but not far. I taught middle school at Mount Abraham for 20 years. Then I was able to go back to school, and I earned my doctorate at the University of Vermont. And then I have taught there for 20 years, working with teachers who want to become middle school teachers or aren't sure, but then decide they want to and love it and are passionate about it. And that would be Melissa, who was one of my grad students, supervisor. So that was a great experience. There are so many things, and I will share some of them later, but right now, my own recollection, there are two things. One is, a little embarrassing, and it's like full disclosure, I had a crush on all my male teachers in middle school, and, would offer to mow their lawn and whatever, just to be, just because that was it. Those are the years when you have a crush on either a teacher or somebody in 7th grade, and then the next day you realize they're not right for you. And the other thing I remember is forgetting that a friend had a birthday and literally begging the principal, Merle Crown, for some of you who might have remembered Merle Crown, and his allowing me to race home to get a gift for my friend Judy, and just racing back during lunch, because friendships are so important in middle school. So, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Jeannie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jeannie Phillips, and I work for the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education at the University of Vermont. I'm also a former school librarian where I've worked K-6 and also 7 to 12. What I love most about visiting middle schools now is that it reminds me that when I was in middle school, I knew I was so fashionable. Because, I wore neon and checkered Vans. And so when I see their kids in their checkered Vans and their neon, it reminds me of the last time I felt truly cutting edge and fashionable was middle school. So it delights me to see fashions come right around and remember how important it is, your identity and how you express your identity in middle school. I also just want to say I use she, her pronouns. Thank you so much for inviting me to the panel.
Thank you for sharing. Melissa, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Melissa Muzzy. I teach middle school science here at the high school. This is my 22nd year here, and I have been fortunate enough to be able to work with several of these people, which is very exciting. I will have to say, as Mary mentioned, I went to the teaching program determined that I was going to teach high school because I love the content and I wanted to be able to teach the content, and I felt that that was going to be the best way to do it because I loved it so much and I wanted the kids to love it. And she urged me to say, try middle school, Melissa, give middle school a shot. You should really give it a shot. So I did, and I fell in love with it immediately. There's something about the chaos, the excitement, the never knowing what's going to happen each day. It's always something new every single day. It never gets tiring because there's always a new adventure, a new saga, a new drama that's caught up in the middle of everything else that we're doing. And the kids genuinely still are at that age where they love to learn. They love to be excited. They're okay with being silly sometimes. And they really do genuinely still care and are excited about what's going to happen and the idea that they can make a difference. So that's what I love about middle school.
That's great. Mr. DeBlois, you're up next.
Okay, so I'm Matt DeBlois I think Melissa has one semester on me because I think I'm at 21 and a half years in this school district. And for 14 and a half of those, I worked at the middle high school. And for many of those years, I taught middle school French as well. I'm currently the principal at Virgins Union Elementary School. I don't know this is what you're looking for, Sheila. I attended a couple different middle schools and a junior high. I moved when I was 12 and I went from a middle school to a different middle school and then to a junior high. And I had a very antagonistic relationship with my 8th grade science teacher. We also offered metal shop and we tried a fusion class where you plugged a 12-volt buzzer into a 220 outlet. And that was a very memorable experience for me. In middle school.
Thank you. Andy, you're up next.
Hi, Andy Capus, currently the Ferrisburg principal for the last 3 years. I taught middle school math and science for 16 years at various schools. Middle school memory for me, I remember in 7th and 8th grade, we had these things called mini courses. I learned how to play bridge, which I still love playing bridge. We did the newspaper, the magazine, read books. And that was just, it's funny that I remember that end of the day, these little 45-minute classes that we had that as kind of the highlights of my middle school days.
Thank you. And Kathleen.
Hi, y'all. I'm Kathleen Brinegar. I use she, her pronouns. I work in the middle level teacher education program at the University of Vermont. So I work with pre-service candidates who want to teach middle school. I'm also one of the co-editors of Middle School Journal, and I sit on the Research Advisory Council for the Association of Middle Level Education. So lots of different roles in middle school. I actually got my teaching start at Virgins High School, teaching 7th and 8th grade, which was wonderful. I taught on a 2-person team, Team Farside, for anyone who remembers Team Farside. I think I'll share one of my memories from that. And I think I still look fondly at taking 42 Virgins Union middle school students to New York City for a few days. And I was clearly 20 years younger than I am now, because I don't know if I would be able to do that at this point, but we took public transportation to New York City. So we didn't have a bus. And we taught the students how to navigate the subway. We went to the Bronx Zoo. We saw a Red Sox Yankees game, since half our students were Yankees fans, half were Red Sox fans. We went and saw Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. Definitely, I think for me, it's a huge reminder of the fact that middle school is about learning that happens in the classroom, but also those outside of the classroom experiences too, being such an important part of it.
Great. It's actually one of the questions that someone asked, so that's great. We can talk more about that a little bit later. I also want to acknowledge that we have several community engagement committee members attending this as well. We have, and I hope I don't miss anyone, we have Bill Clark, Bill Kunkel, Kim Trombley, Christina Macklin, and I think that's everyone. So thank you to those committee members for joining in tonight as well. So what we have to kick this off tonight is a video that actually Matt and Melissa worked on that kind of highlights, I think, the student experience and what they have to share really about what's special to them about middle school, some of their thoughts and memories of middle school, and it's paired nicely with some clips of our own students day in and day out in our building. So I think I'll kick off with that if that's okay, and I hope the audio's all right for this. Sometimes tech isn't always cooperative, but we'll hope for the best.
Some middle schoolers like to do like different more responsible with our choices. And yeah.
Okay. What's one middle school learning experience that you enjoyed and why?
It was probably getting to create our personal narratives because we got to pick how we would make it, how we would present it, and how it would all work out. And we had our own time to work on it.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
What should teachers and community members know about middle schoolers?
Let's see. Can we skip this one? Can we do the other one?
There's only two, but sure.
Yeah, can we skip
What is one middle school learning experience that you enjoyed and why?
one middle school learning experience? Meeting my friends and seeing my friends.
Why?
Because they're my friends and I love my friends.
Okay.
And my friends are cool.
Right, fair. It was a two-part question, that's why I asked. So back to the first question. What should teachers and community members know about middle schoolers?
That like if we're not looking at you doesn't mean that we're not paying attention. We're like trying to learn. Because some teachers are like, oh, what are you trying to do? And like once I was trying to get my pencil, and then some teacher yelled at me for getting my pencil. I'm like, why are you yelling at me? I didn't do anything. And like if talking back is disrespectful when they're like literally yelling at us. They're like, don't raise your voice at me. But like we didn't do anything. It's so annoying. Like, could we just have a little bit of freedom too? That I would say they have attitude and they like to do things their own way. And yeah, they just like to, I guess, have more freedom in class more than just like the teacher talking all the time. Yeah.
Okay. What is one middle school learning experience that you enjoyed and why?
I think the best middle school learning experience is probably, it's a hard one.
It's not your favorite, it's just one
Yeah.
that you enjoyed.
Probably the personal narrative. Yeah. I mean, we haven't done much this year, but I think that's like the biggest thing that we did and one of my favorites.
So why did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it because not only did you like get to share experience, but you got to like do it with other people. Because like in the past we've had to do like a solo narrative where it was just like about our personal lives, but now we get to do it with like an experience that you had with like a friend or something. Or yeah.
Okay, thanks. What should teachers and community members know about middle schoolers?
That I would just like to learn to use hands-on, and I don't know how to be like sitting around. I want to be able to do active stuff.
Okay. What is one middle school learning experience that you enjoyed and why?
I just like having the choice of being able to learn what I want, like working on my learning, for instance. I can do what I want and not have to be under fully strict on top of things like in third grade school and stuff.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe that something is tough and they might be going through a hard time.
Okay. What is one middle school learning experience that you enjoyed and why?
Probably. It's a good question. I'm trying to think.
Okay, take your time.
We did what's called a wax exam in my old school where it would basically, like, you would have to do a whole poster board about your character, and like then you would, that day you would dress up as that person and you would have your whole poster board.
Why do you remember that, or why did you enjoy that?
It was really fun.
Alright, cool, thanks. What should teachers and community members know about middle schoolers?
I think middle schoolers are pretty unruly most of the time. They like a certain level of hands-on learning because I think if you make too much schooling, like if you have too many subjects, then children aren't going to want to do their work. So things that I liked were like Genius Hour, and we did like a chili cook-off and like a cupcake bake-off, and I think those were beneficial because we had like a break, but we could still like work on teamwork strategies and things like that. And I think it was beneficial that we have like shorter classes. They were like 55 minutes. Yeah, so I think they're just getting into the concept of higher education, so we should start them off a little bit easier.
Okay, so what's one middle school learning experience you enjoyed and why?
That's sort of hard. I mean, I personally enjoyed the cook-offs, so that's why I brought it up, because it was something we could still get to know our classmates. Also, as a youth, I like to attend the Peace Monday gatherings and the class competitions we got to watch, even though we didn't get to participate. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Middle schoolers get caught in a lot of drama.
We're hungry all the time.
What is one thing that adults and teachers should know about middle schoolers?
Some of us think that we are the center of the room.
We have a short attention span.
So, what should adults and teachers know about middle school students?
We need longer lunches and more breaks.
I agree.
I think we need more hands-on activities, so like different options for everybody, so they can all find something interesting and fun about learning.
I think everybody learns at different speeds, so there needs to be a way for all students to be engaged in activities and lessons.
What are some middle school learning experiences that you enjoyed? And what was that?
Making boats with cardboard and duct tape and then racing them across the bridge at an elementary school. And we won.
What did you like most about that?
It was fun and it was better than doing school. And we won. I like the social piece of it and just like the hands-on project. Yeah, because we gotta be with friends that we don't normally are with people in class. Middle schoolers are more social and we like to do activities with our team. Middle schoolers tend to tell the truth a lot.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that. We have one more piece of student sharing, I guess, for everyone. I'm just going to pull up. We did a thought exchange, which is a little bit like a survey, but it's actually a way for respondents to interact with other people's responses also. So we actually asked students a similar question to what Matt was asking in the video. Hopefully you can see my screen here. We asked, what are some things you wish teachers, administrators, and other adults knew about you as a student? And so we had 138 students respond to this thought exchange. They provided 242 thoughts. And then as part of the thought exchange, they're able to rate everyone else's thought. If they agree with the thought or it's something that's true for them too, they would rate that very high, maybe 5 stars. If it's something that they don't think is important or isn't true for them, they would rate that maybe as a 1 star or anything in between. So we had over 3,000 ratings for this particular thought exchange. So it's a way to really kind of theme and understand better what students are or what anyone is thinking. So we had a pretty even breakdown of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students participate. You can see that distributed there. We also asked about gender identity, and you can see the breakdown there. And we asked how they self-identify, and they provided their answers there, which you can see the breakdown. So also with their responses, the technology embedded into the tool provides a word cloud. So these are the most commonly reported words in anything students had to share. And it just kind of populates them. The larger the word, the more often it came up. And the smaller the word, the less often it came up. Words that are colored in the same color are actually connected to each other. So they came up often in the same response. So that can kind of give you a feel for what's important or what's on the minds of students in this age range. And then these were some of the key thoughts from the survey. I won't read through all of them, but I'll leave it up for a minute for you to see. So over on the right, you can see those are the top 3 ranked thoughts in the survey. So everyone else that rated this, these are the top 3 that emerged. We're going to talk after about all of these things that have come up in the video and in this thought exchange about what we think this really says about middle level learners. We themed the responses in terms of how they connected with these overarching themes about middle school. So the total number of thoughts that had to do with culture and community, that's building relationships with students and having a sense of belonging. Those questions were the most frequently reported. Then the next most common was around teaching and learning, structures and organization, or other, if there wasn't a theme that it belonged in any other way. So you can kind of see there. And then you can kind of see the breakdown in terms of how they rated. So within those same categories, they actually rated very similarly. So these things are all important to students. It's just more often they report on. I see we have a hand up, so let me see. Who had their hand up? Amy, Amy, did you have a question?
I didn't. I think I accidentally raised my hand.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Around structures and organization, these were the things that students reported. They like mask breaks. They don't like to sit for a long time, and they wish they had more free periods in their day when they can socialize with each other, not necessarily only kids from their grades. And especially they noted that because during quarantine, they didn't see many of their friends. They're really enjoying seeing them again, which makes sense. Under teaching and learning, they spoke to wanting to have more hands-on learning experiences. They're not fans of homework, and they want to acknowledgement that they don't necessarily all learn at the same pace. Again, culture and community, I think we had these up already. And then other, don't like masks. This was actually commonly reported. The students said they know a lot about me already. They felt my teachers know me, which I think is testament to our staff, and that they don't like online tests. So that was just some more thoughts from students. I'm going to end that and ask our panelists to just kind of weigh in. What do you think all of this, the video, the responses to the thought exchange, say about our students or about middle level learners in general? And just go ahead and popcorn out.
When I watched the video, I think something that stood out for me very clearly is the piece around relationships and friendships and relationships with not only their peers, but also their teachers, and the importance and value of that and how it can enhance their academic experience. Ultimately, again, with their students, someone mentioned you know, they've done some things, I forget if it was a personal narrative, they've done it on their own, but then they had the experience to work with another person, and that just made it that much richer for them. So if they're more engaged, the product will be generally, you know, better as well. So I saw a lot about choice, hands-on. Um, you know, I think it all speaks to something that the Middle Grades Institute, which many people here have been involved in, just about everybody, but we had one summer that it was just about voice and choice in the middle. And we talked about how we can engage students and how we can give them that, while also being so careful to have, to be able to guide them and to be able to be supporting that in a positive way. So that's what just stood out, is the friendships, doing things with other people, hungry all the time. I liked that because I have a 7th grade grandson who is just comes home and he's hungry. And my favorite line that I've heard as a joke, but then he said it one day, is that he wasn't as crazy about the lunches at the middle school as he was at the elementary school. But the bigger problem was that he didn't get enough. So there you go. That's kind of middle school.
It all made so much sense. I mean, I love the video because it showed the joy. There is so much fun happening at the middle level. I forgot to say that earlier. And by the way, Matt, Kathleen, yeah, I mean, they were at the school same time I was. But oh, the joy. Oh, the joy. It's so much fun to be with this group of students. And then in the thought exchange, exactly what they said, they know themselves. They're social creatures. This is right in our research. We know young adolescents need their friends. They need, you know, these specific elements that they voiced for us, so that they can learn and grow.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is the piece about independence, right? I think a lot of them voiced that need to, you know, that they want to, you know, try things on their own for the first time, that they want to sort of be left alone a little bit more, right? Not quite as, things not quite as structured, and I appreciated that. That's such, and it's such an important part of their development, right? If we don't give them some of that time to make mistakes and be independent, then they're not going to learn and grow into, right, the adults that we want them to be. So, and they deserve to be.
Is anything else you want to add before we go on?
I'd just like to apologize for saying okay, cool so frequently. So sorry about that.
That's okay. So for those of you attending, we have we sent out a survey to anyone wanting to glean what your questions are for the panelists, and then we kind of summarize those into themes. So for the rest of the presentation tonight, I'm going to just ask questions, and I'm going to invite our panelists to share answers. And we may hear from more than one panelist on any given question. And then with any time we have at the end, we'll open it up for additional questions from any of you attending tonight. So the first question for our panelists are, what are best practices for promoting social emotional learning and building belonging in this age group? And Jeannie, you might be first.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in. I think we heard a lot from the video and from the students about how important relationships are to them. And we know that learning is social. And so I would say there are a couple of things to keep in mind. And the first and foremost is advisory, an opportunity for students to connect with academic mentors and also build belonging in a smaller community within the school and develop those social emotional skills together. And I would say a lot of folks have what they call advisory, but in order for it to really be advisory and to work well, they must meet regularly, at least weekly. It has to be facilitated time in some way so that the group spends that time developing connections, learning and playing together. And it has to be intentional about building and sustaining community. It's not just a study hall or homeroom. And then I would add that social emotional learning can't just happen in advisory. It has to be intentional. There has to be some intentionally building of community and relationships in every single space that our young people are in their classrooms, in the lunchroom, everywhere that they are. So learning through play, collaboratively developing agreements and norms in classrooms, connecting what they're learning about identity and who they are and their community to what they're learning in the classroom. And it's a way of building school with them instead of having school be something that's done to them. And I think we heard an example of that in the form of the personal narrative that many of the kids were really excited about in the video. And then finally, I would say, and I mentioned it before, identity is crucial and it can be curriculum. Right? It's not just that we're meeting the developmental needs of our students, but we're also understanding who they are and helping them understand who they are and who each other is so that they can build that strong community. And they're already really wondering, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I fit in? These are questions they're sitting with. Who are my friends? What's it mean to be a good friend? And so those are important questions to consider in the course of their content areas and not just in advisory. So I would say that exploring this together makes their learning more relevant. It gives them the vocabulary and tools they need as humans and learners, and it allows educators to learn more about their students. And it was great to hear that kids felt like their teachers knew them. That made my heart warm. And so that those middle school educators can be responsive to both the developmental needs and the identities of young people. And I'm sure some of these amazing panelists want to jump in on this question too.
Anyone else? We have more about belonging, so I can move on. Then the next question is about agency and decision making. So how much agency and decision making do students have? We heard them say they like to be independent and they like to make their own choices. So where are there opportunities within their day or within the curriculum to make choices? And be specific if you've either observed this happening in other schools too. If you're a panelist or if you work in our schools, you can speak about what happens currently.
I'll kind of kick this one off a little bit. I think anytime that we can be deliberate about making informed choices for kids, whether that be through a literacy menu, whether that be the choices around your personal narrative and having that guidance, I think a lot of times we try to facilitate that through both advisory and class. I can think of the student-led conferencing that happens at the middle school is a pretty engaged process. It was for my children. I think Melissa and I went to something in 2009 that may have started that in Massachusetts, and really building on that autonomy that kids frankly have when they leave elementary school and then have to in some ways reset when they transition between buildings, and just being mindful of those opportunities. Making sure that kids have opportunities to engage with younger students. We have at the elementary level, like kindergarten and 6th grade buddies. And I think it may have been Sheila and I talking the other day about like 7th grade and 12th grade buddies. Why don't we do that? How do we build those parallel structures across multiple settings that offer students both roles and responsibilities that build upon that autonomy, that increases their agency? And I think, talking about what Jeannie said, making sure that students feel welcome within the building and as they are, not as maybe other groups of people might see them, but really being overt about what we want to do to be more inclusive.
That's awesome. Does anyone want to add to that?
I can add a little bit from the middle school perspective here. I would say that one thing you can count on a middle schooler is they are going to give you your opinion about everything. And so they will give you your opinion about things. Oftentimes the struggle is to try to get them to come up with solutions to advocate for themselves or in order to make the situation better instead of just complaining about a situation. So one of the things we did do last year is we started it's called the SRT, Student Response Team. And the student response team was a group of students who gathered information. They put a poster in the hall about what are some things that you think need to be addressed in the middle school. And they left them on posters around the hall, and kids would sign up and say some things that they needed to. They'd put check marks next to things that they agreed with and they thought needed to be addressed. And that group then met and they came up with a presentation and they presented it to the middle school teachers. Some of the things that they were most concerned about were last year in particular with COVID, there being additional breaks, mass breaks throughout the day. They wanted to make sure that there was some sort of snack built in, an extra chance to eat. As you heard, they're hungry all the time. And they also wanted to make sure that during lunches, we had them grouped by morning meetings, and they were also with morning meetings in the beginning of the day. And they wanted there to be a chance for there to be some different groupings to be able to socialize with other kids throughout the day. So as a teaching staff, we met and we rearranged our schedule a little bit. We added some more mass breaks, even if it was a short walking break around the school. We added in the opportunity for them to eat during those breaks as well if they needed to, because we weren't allowed to eat in the classrooms at that point in time. We did rearrange our lunch groups halfway through the year and regroup them. We actually sent out a Google survey for our kids to be able to choose lunch groups that they would like to be in. So we tried to cluster them with people that they were in. Last year, we also had, because we had to have coverage for lunch, we had like a 25-minute block during the day where teachers had to supervise their morning meetings again after lunch. And so we would organize different activities and the kids would have some voice and choice in what the activities they wanted to do during that 25-minute block at the end of each day. This year, the SRT is still active again. They're right now trying to brainstorm new things that they can do and ideas that kids have to bring forward.
Thank you. All right, let's move on. There was a question about restorative practices. Do kids participate in restorative practices as part of their curriculum? That question also included a question about what opportunities students have to explore learning outside the classroom. So it's kind of two separate questions. So does anyone want to speak to this and maybe provide just a little overview of what restorative practices are for anyone that might not know?
Do you want me to take that one on?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll answer it in two parts. So I think there historically have been opportunities for kids to engage in restorative practices, and so by that I mean when there's as Jeannie referred to, like a violation of an expectation or a deviation from an established classroom norm, then that group, depending on what the situation was, might get together and have a conversation, a facilitated conversation about that at an appropriate time, depending on kind of the nature of the infraction. And throughout time, I'll say it's been a little while since I worked in the middle and high school, we met as a morning meeting and decided, if that student was on a behavioral plan for those of you who might know what that is, we then kind of had a discussion and throughout the day identified supports that student could use in order to make sure that they were meeting the classroom or school guidelines or expectations. So that is a restorative practice that's been used in the past at VUHS. In terms of outdoor learning experiences, which I think is the second part of the question, Sheila, there are and have been kind of different experiences that have happened in the past. I think many folks used outdoor spaces. If you don't know the physical layout of the building or of the grounds, there is a connected outdoor classroom between VUES and VUHS that has, beavers, down trees, all kinds of fun stuff, bridges, sitting spaces, and that is accessible to both the middle and the high school. And we're looking into, I guess, more deliberate, flexible pathways for all students, not just middle school students. So.
Great. Do any of our panelists have experience from other schools that you want to share around either restorative practice or outdoor learning or flexible pathways for students at this grade level?
I can share some more. I just wanted to, one of the things about restorative practices as well is it doesn't just look at repairing harm, it also looks at building relationships. So we did actually have training at the high school with restorative circles during morning meeting, which are where you, just so you know, like in every morning meeting, the morning meetings they gather in a circle. We don't sit by desks. We all sit in a circle. That way everybody feels like they are part of the conversation and are involved in the conversation. We greet every morning. So if Mary's to the right of me, I would say, good morning, Mary. She would say, good morning, Melissa. And we have a question that we share with each other. So it could be like, what is your favorite kind of ice cream and why do you like it? And so it's just a greeting where we get started, where everybody kind of can build some relationships and we can look at some commonalities, what things we have in common with each other. And then there's normally some sort of game or activity, or it could be a dialogue. And one of those restorative circles would be to have conversations about things that are important and real and things that can build relationships. I could say, like the other day, I wrote up a restorative circle. We were having issues with some sort of bullying and harassment. So we talked about what the difference was between intent, like intent and actually harm, like harm and repair. What's the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule? Do unto others as you would like done unto you, as do unto others as they would like done unto them. So we had that conversation about what the difference was between them and how obeying the platinum rule would be different than the golden rule. And that would be more likely to avoid any sort of bullying or anything that they may think may be harmful, because you ask what is okay, what is not okay. So we did have some restorative circles about that. The other part, like Matt said, is the more of the restorative of repairing harm. And we have had behavior protocols in the past where kids, if they show repeated negative behaviors, they will get on a behavior protocol plan and they will present it to their morning meeting. And the morning meeting actually acts as a support network for the student. So if kids are in classes with the students, they talk about what their plan is, why they were on the plan, what they want to do differently. And then we have students throughout the day help monitor their classmate. So if they're in class and it says, so-and-so really has a hard time calling out in class and doesn't pay attention, we'd say, okay, Sally, you're in class with them. Can you kind of help remind them? And so they'll help remind and give some help throughout the day. And then we'll meet the next day and discuss and talk about what they did. They would be their advocate, they're their ally. They'll also call them if they're being untruthful. They'd be like, well, you actually did do this. So a lot of it was making sure that there was some sort of accountability for their actions and they did repair any damage they had in relationships. So far as restorative practices right now in the middle school, it's unfortunate that we don't really have very many reformative practices. There isn't that behavior protocol anymore. There's not just the supports available in order to make that happen in the school. So that is one thing, though, that the middle school staff in particular, when we're looking at what we would like in an ideal middle school, is we really do want to make sure that there is support staff to be able to keep those restorative practices in place.
Does anyone else want to say anything more before we move on to teaching and learning? Okay, moving on, teaching and learning questions. Can you discuss the research that exists regarding mixing grades at this age, specifically when grades 6 through 8 are involved versus teaching the grades separately? What are the panelists' opinions around the pros and cons of these variations? And Monica, I think you put your name next to this question.
I did, and I did a little research on this. I was looking at the AMLE, the Association for Middle Level Education Research, and overwhelmingly, looping, which is which is what they call when you do the multi-year, the research behind it says that, the relationships, as we keep bringing up that word, are so important. And when you loop, it gives teachers, extra time with the students to really get to know the students. And in fact, saves a lot of time from year to year, where the teachers can move more into the academics more quickly, rather than having to build the social, from year to year. And also with kids, again, overwhelmingly, the research tells us that it's really important for middle schoolers to see perspectives from different age groups, so the older folks can model behaviors and be sort of the experts, whereas the younger students can learn from their peers. So what I've seen, I was looking at the pros and cons. The only con I could see was perhaps certification. You want to make sure that the teachers have the understanding about young adolescent development and what students need.
Anyone else on grade configurations?
I'm happy to chime in a little bit because I think want to clarify too the difference between looping and multi-age, because they can both happen, but they don't have to. So looping is when you have the same, as a teacher, you have the same students for multiple years. So perhaps you have them when they enter as sixth graders, and then they stay with you the next year as seventh graders, and perhaps even again the next year as eighth graders. So that would be looping. And you can loop, for 2 years, you can loop for 3 years. Some schools loop for 4 years, 5 through 8. So that can happen in conjunction with mixed or separately. So mixed would be you're looping, but you have maybe 5th and 6th grade together on a team. And so each year, half of your team moves on, and you fill your team with students from the year below. There's benefits to both. And one of the things we know about middle schoolers is developmentally, they vary so widely in terms of where they all are, that there are, you have, when I was teaching at Virgins, it was always a joke because I'm not very tall that, students knew they were ready for 9th grade when they grew taller than me. And some of them were taller than me when I got them as 7th grade students. And some of them, right, it took the whole 2 years. And so I think people get anxious about multi-age at this age group, but developmentally, there's such vast differences in a 7th grade class or 6th grade class or an 8th grade class that there aren't any negative aspects from a developmental perspective.
Thank you. All right. Next question. How do you meet the needs of students who don't learn in traditional ways? Mary.
Yes. When I first started thinking about this question, I had so many thoughts, because there are the schools, there are non-traditional ways of learning that have you going to Red Cedar, or going to, the program at Virgins at the high school.
Walden?
Walden, yes. I mean, that would be a non-traditional learning. But then I thought about all the ways that it can happen within the school, which I think is important. So certainly learning outside the classroom in a different environment. And Matt mentioned the outdoor classroom at Virgins Elementary. I know that last year was a godsend for teachers and some of the teachers and students, because it did afford them an opportunity to learn in a different way, same material, but they were also experiencing just sort of the magic and beauty of being outside. So certainly expeditionary learning, which is learning by doing, and whether you are in a language arts class or a science class, there are ways to use your own curriculum and develop expeditionary learning within that curriculum. What do I want to say? Let's see. I thought about, just to go back to the leaving the building, and I think both Monica and Kathleen reminisced about times that they had taken students from Virgins to away. And I know the amount of learning that goes on because, and this is also a bit of a statement on the looping, because when I taught the 20 years at Mount Abe, I had 7th grade students and had them again in 8th grade. And as 7th graders, we started writing to, my sister lived in northern Canada. We started writing to her students, learning about their culture, learning about the environment that they lived in. They were doing the same. So throughout that 7th grade year, we made this connection. And in 8th grade, at the end of 8th grade, after much study, writing, so it was like social studies and English, and we took 42 students on a school bus to Chibougamau, which is in northern Quebec, and it was a 14-hour school bus ride. But we spent a week there, and the experiences they had, I still run into students who say that it was life-changing for them and that they have never experienced anything like it. And it was a NORAD station, the largest Hydro-Quebec substation in the world. They lived, some of them, with Cree natives. And so obviously those are and the learning was tremendous. So back to the school, I think a teacher being a role model around non-traditional learning and talking about their own experiences can be very beneficial and supportive of those students who don't learn in the traditional sitting at the desk, listening to a teacher, or just engaging in sort of the reading, writing, that curriculum that way. It's giving them student agency, giving them meaningful activities that they can be a part of choosing, that are relevant and driven by their own interests. And one of my greatest examples of this is, again, when I was observing a graduate student, but she had allowed students to select something to give a report on. There was a lot of work with note cards, the whole thing, and working up to an oral presentation. And a student that had not been successful in the school chose to write about, I think they were Corvettes or Porsches, I can't quite remember. But what I do remember is his standing in front of his class with no note cards, with just his passion and his energy and his excitement of being able to talk about something for which, he was the expert. And so I think if we can give students those opportunities and allow them to work in non-traditional ways, whether it's singing. I just spoke to a 7th grader who was like presenting something, and they said they were going to do it in a musical. They're writing a little musical. I can't even remember specifically what it was, but allowing them to use different intelligences. If they are artistic, allow them to use art. So there are many ways that we can do it within the classroom setting. And I was also thinking about technology as a friend, because we may not be able to go out, and I know things, especially now, are very difficult, but we do have the technology to bring the Maritime Museum into the classroom, or the Louvre. There are things that we can do to help students who are non-traditional learners be excited about a project or a piece of writing or whatever it might be. So that's sort of, I'll start that off and let others join in. Thanks.
Yep.
I'd love to jump in a little bit. I think this, what Mary's just talking about connects well with what Matt mentioned earlier about flexible pathways. And I think that there can be this misconception that flexible pathways means doing an online course or doing early college or doing something outside of the school. And especially in middle school, we think about flexible pathways as just really powerful learning opportunities like service learning or project-based learning or problem-based learning, right? Something that just really pulls kids in and makes them feel, I think Mary used the word relevant and meaningful, right? And so that can provide, and then voice and choice throughout as they navigate that can be a really powerful way to engage in those flexible pathways. Going out to the wild space that Matt mentioned and doing outdoor education is another example. And I would just like to challenge this notion that traditional learning works for anyone. I actually think it's not just, yeah, some kids are better at playing school, right? And they're going to win at playing school, but that these kind of powerful learning opportunities are better for all kids, not just for kids who don't fit the mold.
Thank you for that, Jeannie. And the other thing that I wanted to be sure to say is that with any of these wonderful non-traditional activities or ways of introducing curriculum, it's always important that there's teacher support and regular feedback.
Great. I'm going to move on. There was a question in here about executive functions. How are executive functions taught and evaluated? And I think as part of that answer, it would be helpful to define executive functions for our audience. And Monica, would you like to do that?
Absolutely, I've got that information. But before I do that, this is my time for my little plug. Connecting with what Mary just said, many of us on this panel actually have been involved in the Vermont Association for Middle Level Education. We have an anchor text right there at the VAMLE.org website that is called Middle School is Not a Building. And it's exactly what we're talking about here, which is middle school is developmental stage. It's not about the four walls, right? And I'm so glad Jeannie was talking about flexible pathways. You know, it's all about being flexible. And that's why also you need to know out there that your middle level teachers are the most creative and flexible people in the world. They're also the most joyful, knowledgeable, and at Vergennes, for years, the restorative practices piece has been a part kind of the morning meeting. So I just wanted to throw all that out there. And then I can move to executive functioning. So executive functioning, we know through brain research that the brain is not fully developed at the middle level. In fact, the prefrontal cortex is the section, the front part of the brain that really works with executive functioning. And those are mental skills that include working memory, self-control, flexible thinking. And those are the types of things we're really working on at the middle level, is building those executive functioning skills. And they include things like focus, being able to focus, follow directions, handling our emotions. And so teachers have, that's again, the skills, the knowledge, middle level teachers who studied young adolescents, they have ways that they work with students and talk with students so that they can build mental metacognition, you know, asking students to think about their own thinking and what they're doing, building time management by using small chunks, you know, and helping students to create these executive functioning skills, giving them lots of reviews so that they're activating their schema, again, building that muscle memory in the brain. And that's huge. So executive functioning is a big part of what teachers do as they work with young adolescents.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to thinking about preparing students for the next steps in high school. That's a question. How are teachers preparing students for the next steps in high school? Jeannie and Melissa.
I just want to start again with thinking about the question a little bit. I think what Monica just said is really important, that middle schoolers developmentally are in a different place than high schoolers. And John Dewey famously said, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And so I want to just say that middle school isn't just preparation for high school. It's an important stage of its own, with really valuable things for kids to experience and learn and be a part of. And I would also say that education isn't a race. Faster isn't better. We're not trying to get kids further along so that they beat the other kids in high school. And so the number one thing that I think we at the Tarrant Institute think that prepares kids for high school is thinking of themselves as learners, being confident in their capacity to learn and engage and have agency over their learning. And the research bears that out. The researcher that I know writes a lot about this is Camille Farrington, and she talks about academic mindsets, which is just this sense that I belong in this learning community. I can learn, I can do this thing. And so I think the rich, powerful teaching methods and pedagogies we've been talking about, like service learning and project-based learning, help kids gain that confidence in themselves as problem solvers, as thinkers, as folks who can really do meaningful things. And those authentic learning tasks help them learn to be really strategic as we support them as they strive for proficiency. They increase their metacognition. They provide kids opportunities to reflect on themselves as learners. And then I think the other piece of that is the importance of transferable skills. Monica just talked a little bit about that when she talked about executive function, but self-direction, communication, creativity, problem solving, collaboration. These are skills that cross the curriculum and can be learned in advisory. And if we are deliberate about fostering these skills in young people, they'll have what they need to succeed in high school and beyond.
Melissa, did you have anything to add?
I was just gonna give you the concrete things that we were doing in case people wanted to know specifics about what was getting done here. So I've got kind of a list. I got it from the rest of the teachers and the staff here. So to help prepare, school counselors do a presentation and an orientation in January for the students to be able to start to be thinking about high school. Also, starting in January, school counselors will be meeting with each eighth grader individually to talk about high school course selections. There's also career future plan lessons and teen adventure. There's a capstone project at the end of the 8th grade that helps solidify research and presentation skills. And those coincide with what Jeannie was just talking about transferable skills. So there is a common set of transferable skills and content standards that are used through 7th through 12th. So we are also teaching with the same learning scales, which is where students are going so they can progress through them. If they start at a 2 in middle school, we're hoping to get to 3. The expectations are a little bit different, but in particular, we do have inquiry standards. So science in particular, I teach a lot to the inquiry standards, and there's 4 of them. And they're the same inquiry standards that the students are going to be assessed with in high school. Also, along with that, our content standards, the science teachers in particular, and language arts and social studies have universal content standards that we teach to, so that we are kind of trying to spiral our curriculum so that students are learning the basics of what they need in middle school to build upon those once they get into high school. We also, at the end of 8th grade, do a capstone project, which again reinforces and lets us know if kids can use those transferable skills. It's an independent research project that's based on their own individual interest, and they can present it in various ways. Talking about flexible pathways, there's different ways that kids are able to present it based on their strengths. In the past, we've done before COVID, we've done field trips to Walden Center and the Career Center, so kids can be exposed to those different options. High schoolers come and talk to the 8th graders about what high school is like. Middle school teachers also meet with the high school teachers and give them a little bit of information regarding students. So if there's specific information, like they said, by looping, which we do loop right now, so you know, we do loop with one age group. So I'll have students in 7th grade, I'll have the same group of students in 8th grade. By that time, I do know my students really well, and it's helpful to be able to meet with those 9th grade teachers and pass on information about what works really well with students, what are some strategies that have been helpful. So we do meet with them. And we also do meet with our content area teachers 7 through 12 regularly to discuss, again, what we're doing and next steps to make sure kids are prepared.
Thank you. One more question in the teaching and learning section about homework. What does the research say, or what are best practices for homework at the middle level?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that one a little bit. So I think the challenging thing is that research on homework is inconclusive and contradictory. So I think that's a really important thing to put out there, that there is not clear research any one way, but there are some things that research does show. But also I think it's important to point out that I think a lot of us picture the fact homework as something that has always happened and has been an important part of our educational system in the US. But homework has actually ebbed and flowed, like a lot of practices, and it tends to ramp up in US schools when we're in competition with other countries or when we're feeling like we are falling behind as a country. So for example, in the 1950s, homework ramped up, right? We were feeling like we were behind the Soviet Union, and so we started giving our students more homework. 60s and 70s, a new thinking around homework, and we backed off as a country on homework. 80s and 90s with No Child Left Behind and feeling like, again, we were falling behind as a country. We ramped up homework. And now I think with COVID, the tides are turning again, and we're sort of thinking about the social emotional needs of students and the fact that families everyone is exhausted, and do kids need more homework after school? So I just wanted to put that in a little bit of context, that it has shifted over time. So what some of the things that we do know about it? One is that there are few types of homework that are proven to have beneficial effects, but they are very specific in what they are. One is homework that provides a connection between home and caregivers and school. So homework that asks young adolescents to ask family members questions or investigate something in their community where they can, talk to other people. So homework that brings those connections in have proven to be beneficial for both families and students. And part of that is just aligned with the research that the more caregivers feel connected to schools, the more, the better students tend to do. So that is really linked with that. The other thing is homework that that's around retrieval practice. And we don't actually tend to give a lot of homework like this. So retrieval practice is homework where you would say to a student, it's very low stakes, and you say something like, in science class today, we learned about the parts of the cell. For homework tonight, I want you to not look at any notes. I want you to not open a book, and I want you to write down as many parts of a cell and what they do as you can. Low stakes, not getting assessed on whether it's right or wrong. You don't need family to help you. You don't need materials or resources to do it. It's just a retrieval, and then students bring that in the next day, and you talk about what are the gaps, what are our common gaps, what did we miss, and so it's more of a way to again, easy, quick, low stakes. The third type is exploratory homework, and a lot of that homework is actually tied in with the family and community connection homework, but it's things that ask students to, sometimes personal reflection can fall into that, right? And sometimes it's bigger on those transferable skills. So thinking about what are examples that you show of collaborating outside of school, right? So that you can bring those in and talk about who you are as a whole person when it comes to the transferable skills and not just your in-school things. So those are really the only three types of homework that really have any sort of research-based backing. When it comes to high stakes graded homework, that's when research is either inconclusive or there's research around equity issues, right? Around students' ability to have time to do homework, to have the resources to do homework, to have, any of those elements thrown in. I will add, and also the whole conversation really assumes that there's, when you look at research that says homework should happen, it's often focused on measuring student understanding on very narrow scales, right? So it's just looking at how well students do on standardized tests. It doesn't look at sort of the full development of students and their level of learning and their, how that translates we just answered a question around high school, right? How that learning translates outside of their current environment. Hunt Middle School in Burlington, I will say, is just launching a research project on homework in middle schools, and they're connecting with doctoral students at UVM, or they're working on connecting with doc students so that they can do a full-scale research project. So hopefully that will yield us some interesting results in our Vermont context.
That's awesome. And right post-COVID too. So
Yeah.
it's very timely and relevant. I'm going to cherry pick from our list of questions because I want to leave a little bit of time at the end for anyone in the audience to ask more questions. And I know that there were a couple of questions that came up when we did community engagement around middle school before. And one was about recess and specific to our campus playground or outdoor space at the middle school. So, the question kind of went on to brainstorm ideas about how we could support getting equipment for our students, because we currently don't have playground equipment really at the middle level. But Melissa, can you speak right now to what happens around recess time for students?
Sure, I can talk about the transition that we've had too. Initially, we didn't actually have a recess. We had what was called the Spark, which was a movement that talked about the importance of physical activity and brain activity, and being physically active gets more oxygen to the brain and it helps students be able to think better. So for a long time, we had 15 minutes and it was a Spark, which was an active time in which kids were doing something physical during the entire time. So it could, most of the time it just involved our students either playing outside. So again, we don't have equipment, but we do make do pretty well. We have wall ball in the back where the kids can play wall ball against the wall. We use cracks in the sidewalk for Foursquare. So we play Foursquare. We do have a field where we can play football or ultimate Frisbee. The students will also just take loops. Like right now, what happens is it's a little bit different. We moved away from the Spark itself because it was often hard to make sure kids were being physically active all the time. We'd get clumps of kids that were just sitting because they wanted the social time during that. And if they didn't get, if it's normally one extreme or the other, we normally get kids who really need that body break and they need to move, or kids that really need that social break and have to be able to talk for a little bit. So what we've been doing currently, our practice is, we take 2 loops, and I think it varies. It's very different between 7th and 8th grade, and it's always been this way. 7th grade tends to be a lot more active. They want to get moving a lot more, or they're very hungry. So we had them doing a lot more group games. This year though, 8th graders, I have 8th graders, they've mellowed a lot, and we're very regimented in our routine where we don't allow kids just to sit still. We don't allow kids to be on their cell phones. We want them to be social. This is their time to engage. They should be talking. So our kids, our 8th graders, just automatically go and take 2 laps around the school, where kids will throw the football if they need to be doing it. They'll get to talk with their kids and their friends walk at the same time. So it kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Also, they can eat. So we have that tied in, and we have like a 10-minute, we just call it break now instead of Spark. The 7th grade team does it a little bit different. They have it in the front of the school. Their kids tend to sit more and eat. Like they actually eat most of the break. That's what the 7th grade kids do. And I do think it's kind of a difference. At that age, they just want to eat more. Like their biggest complaint was they needed more snack time. And we don't see the 8th graders really eating much at all during that time. So we don't have any specific playground equipment. What we would love is we did try to advocate to get some Foursquare lines painted, even get a couple of basketball hoops in the back or in some place where the kids could play basketball for a few minutes. That time was cut a little bit shorter this year than it was last year to make for longer classes. So we just have that one 10 to 15 minute break in the morning, and then we do a short mass break in the afternoon where kids just take a short lap and back in again to be able to get a body break.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then this question came up a lot in our previous community engagement. What do you think, panelists, anyone, are the best grades for a middle school, 5 through 8, or 6 through 8? Somebody want to speak to that?
I can speak to that. And similar to the homework piece, is it really, there isn't any research base for which is better. I'll talk about that again. And as Monica referenced earlier, the reason the Vermont Association for Middle Level Education calls their white paper on middle schools not a building, is for that reason, right? So the idea is anyone who's teaching 5th through 8th grade, and sometimes 9th grade fits into that too. It's really about all of these other things that we've been talking about, right? Being developmentally responsive, whether they're in part of an elementary school, whether they're in a separate middle school, or whether they're in a middle school that's connected with a high school, right? So it's more about teachers that know a lot about them, those sorts of things. I will share a little bit about some of the models that we see in Vermont, and because there are many of them. I think there's like, I don't know, Monica, you might know the actual number, but there's many configurations.
There's a great chart in Middle School is Not a Building, and the link is in the chat.
Great. You know, we have 5-8 middle schools in Vermont that are extremely, that work really well. My kids go to one. I have a 5th grader, actually 5th grader and a 9th grader who just finished one. Our elementary schools go up to 4th grade, and by the time they finish 4th grade, they are very ready to transition into a separate building. And the way that the building does it is they loop. When they come in as 5th graders, they have a team and they're with that team for 5th and 6th grade. And then they transition into a new team for 7th and 8th grade. And they largely keep 5, 6 and 7, 8 pretty separate separate within the building. So that's, that's one model. Other 5, 8 school models have, I've seen 5th grade separate. I've seen 6th and 7th together and 8th separate. I've seen models where 6th through 8th grade models where 6 is separate because that's a transition year, and then 7 and 8 are combined and looped. I've seen models where all grades are separate, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8. So it's really about whatever your model is you're focusing on the needs of the students in that moment, right? At that time, because clearly whatever grade's coming in is going to need that transition support. Whatever grade is going out, right, is going to need the transition support going to the high school. So again, I wish it was more conclusive, but I guess the most important thing is there are successful models of both of those types of grade configurations all over the state.
That's helpful. Thank you so much. I want to invite anyone that's attending to ask additional questions. We have about 10 minutes for any other questions. Also, while you're thinking about whether or not you want to raise your hand and voice your question, I will mention that I put an exit card in the chat. It'd be great if you don't mind linking to that as a participant and providing your feedback. I'd really appreciate that. But who in our audience would like to ask a question, either building off something that already was discussed or asking something that hasn't come up? Just if you raise your hand, I can call on you. And to raise your hand, you should see a little button across the bottom of your screen that says raise hand. Great. Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary. I'm from Ferrisburg. My question is around cell phones in schools. I was wondering if there is research on, it seems like being a substitute teacher that the rules seem to be a little bit all over the place, but I was wondering if there was any research on allowing the kids to have them in the school, if there are benefits, or if there's anything around that.
Thank you. I can, Melissa, you could jump in, or I can tell you what's in the handbook for cell phone use in the school. I mean, there are, that's not something we have a policy on per se. It's something that the school establishes rules, and maybe even the classroom teacher has rules around cell phone use. But in terms of research around that, I think there were kind of maybe two parts to that. One might be just like the equity issue of kids who maybe have a cell phone and those that don't, or just the distraction perhaps of having it or how to use it effectively or allow for its use effectively in school. So anyone want to speak to that?
I can talk a little bit if you want. One of the things, first of all, is there used to be more leniency in kids being able to use cell phones in school because it allowed another access point for kids to be able to use technology. Now that we're one-on-one, meaning every student has their own Chromebook, there's no need for kids to be able to be on phones in order to have an equitable learning experience. Every kid has access to anything on their computers at school, which every kid is given. So I think the need for kids to be able to use cell phones in class isn't there anymore. Every so often, it may be that a kid wants to take a picture or a video of something that they've done and they can pull it out. But otherwise, as an equity standpoint, I don't think there's a need for any kid to be able to have a cell phone in a class in order to be able to access the curriculum whatsoever. As far as policies around it, it is a little bit different in the school depending on where you're located. In 7th and 8th grade, the policy is there are no cell phones out. We know in particular that kids in 7th and 8th grade do lack some of the executive functioning skills and decision-making process to be able to set the cell phones aside, even high schoolers. Like, it's kind of an obsession so much, they have to check on it constantly. So our rule is that cell phones are not out at all during the school day. So if they need to contact a parent, they can ask permission to use them, but otherwise we don't allow them out. If kids are found with a cell phone, the first offense is it gets sent, we take it and it gets sent to the office. And then they can pick it up at the end of the day. And then the second offense is that they have to leave it there for a week. And then as they continue to get cell phone violations, the cell phone has to stay in the main office for longer periods of times because they're not able to keep tabs on it themselves. So they can leave it in their lockers if they need to, but again, we don't want to see them out. The high school is a little bit more lenient on it. They do allow the kids to be able to be on their phones in the hallways. They also allow them to be in them during their lunches and sometimes in their callback, but we don't allow them out at all in middle school.
Thanks.
Sheila, can I just add something?
Of course.
I really appreciate Melissa delineating the policy and explaining it. I think one thing I would say is that this isn't just a kid problem, that adults really struggle with cell phones and distractions too. And I just don't want us to scapegoat young people around cell phones when it's really a societal issue. And we have instances of both adults and kids who use cell phones for good purposes, like as a translator or to capture evidence. And we also have instances where they distract us and interrupt our deep thinking and our capacity to do good work. And so I just don't like to think of kids as being the scapegoats for what's a larger societal issue.
Good point. As I have two devices sitting in front of me right now, right? My cell phone, my computer. Thank you. Anyone else, participant, want to ask a question? Just raise your hand. Thank you, Mary, for your question. No one? Wow. Well, I guess maybe we can go around with our panelists just one more time. Any last words on any of the things we talked about tonight? Anything you'd like to share as we close out? And again, I'd love to invite everyone to complete the exit card. So please click on that link. If you can't access it through the chat, just send me an email and I'll send it out to you.
It looks like Bill has a question, Sheila.
Oh, great. Bill Clark. Wonderful. Go ahead, Bill.
Hey there. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure, I'm on the community engagement committee, so I didn't want to dominate our own meeting. Figure I'd give other people a chance. But I'm dying to know, and I know, Sheila's been keeping us updated on the work that you're all doing, but I'm dying to know if as a school board and as a school community, if I'm trying to think how to ask this without being too forward about it. what do you think we should do? I mean, imagine if you could just wave your magic wand and, make changes to middle school learning in our district. Are you there yet, or do you still need some more time to think about that? I mean, I think you'd find a community and a school board that are all ears, because we know we want to do better, but we're not always sure exactly how. So maybe I'm getting way ahead of us, but that's the thing that I'm dying to hear about. And before I shut up, let me just say thank you very much. This was a really great presentation.
I can speak to this because I was on the middle level task force a couple of years ago, where we did have all of the, like a group of middle school teachers. We had some from the elementary schools. We had middle school teachers. We had Andy and Matt were on it, along with some high school teachers. And we actually, one of the things we did was we dreamt big. In a perfect middle school, what would we want? What would be our ideal? And there are a few things that, again, we thought were really important that we would like. One is we would like to have strong leadership that's dedicated and knowledgeable specifically about middle school and advocates for middle school. Right now, we are in a 7-12 school, and a lot of the times the attention is focused on the high school because there's more grades and there are more high stakes in what's happening at the high school. So we would love to have there be an assigned administrator to the middle school. There was one in the past, and that worked well in models, and then it changed. The other thing we really want is there to be a strong focus on building culture and climate. I know there's a lot of controversy onto what grades should be brought over to the middle school and why. And I think a lot of that can be alleviated with a strong attention to building culture and climate in the school, to make people feel safe and to make them feel like they're wanted and involved. So I think before we move anybody over, we really need to take a good, strong look at what we can do to make sure that we have a welcoming culture and a climate. If we're worried about those high school kids and the negative impact they can have on the elementary school kids, we need to build that in them. We need to let them know you are role models. Here are our expectations. Here's what we need you to do. Our kids do that already. Like, we may be afraid of them being with our younger students, but if you go to those soccer clinics on the weekends, you've got kids from 9th to 12th grade working side by side with those little K through 6th graders, and are great role models. Like, every kid is not a bad kid, or every kid is not gonna make bad choices. Often kids that do make bad choices, if they know that somebody is looking up to them, change their behavior. So I think a lot of this is we do have to make sure that we're building a culture and a climate. We look at mentorship and what we can do towards that. We also, again, just need to make sure, like, a lot of it is, again, we need to be clear about what is allowed, what isn't. If we want a culture where there is no swearing allowed in a school, we need to make a united front about that, and we need to make it known why we want that and why it's not appropriate. So I think that's one of the things that we really want, along with there being some restorative practices. We do want to be, and that has to do with culture and climate, building that sense of community, and then also repairing any damage. A lot of times kids in middle school can be brutal to each other. They don't often think outside themselves, and they don't realize what they're doing hurts other people. And they need you to be able to point that out, and they need you to be able to tell them why that's not okay, so that they can fix it and they can learn from it. So I think building in the support staff for those restorative practices would be really important as well. So again, I don't necessarily think it has much to do with what grades are over here, just that there is strong leadership and planning in advance to make sure that there is a culture and a climate that's welcoming here for any grades that come.
Thank you, Melissa. All right, well, we are at 8 o'clock, so I want to thank everyone for their time and devotion to this topic. And I think in the interest of time, I'll cut it there and let people fill out our exit card. And again, thanks to our panelists, and thanks to the attendees for coming tonight. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.